Hello, friends, and welcome back to Stories About Entitled People. People like this lady from our first story are the worst. You get mad at someone for trying to help you? F off. The kind of help you need is an attitude adjustment. But before we begin, best way to support our channel is to leave comments, like, and subscribe with the turned on bell so you don't miss the new video every single day. Here we go. Closing in 5 minutes. This happened while I was working at a gas station in high school. I'd recently put in my 2 weeks' notice and was ready to graduate and move to the city. I used to work at one of 2 gas stations in town while I was in high school. During the summer, we were open until 8 p.m., and the other store was open until 10 p.m. At 7:50, a guy pulls up with his boat, and I start filling it. We chat a little, and he asks when I close. I tell him 8. He says he won't waste my time wandering around the store then, so I can go home on time. Nice guy. Around 7:55, a woman pulls up behind the guy and sits in her car. After about a minute, I realize that she isn't going to pull her car around to the other pump, so I go over to her and tell her we close in less than 4 minutes. Me is me, W is woman. Me. Hi there, we're closing in less than 5 minutes. Do you mind just pulling around so I can get you through a little quicker? Woman. No, I'm fine. I just need $20. I notice her holding a 20 in her hand. Me. Well, if you just want to pull around, I can get you through real quick. W. I'll wait, thanks. Me. If you wait, I likely won't have time to pump your gas. My boss is pretty strict about closing on time. W. You can do your job. Me. At this point, the boat's done, so I take out the nozzle and go inside to put the guy through. Our system was pretty slow, so by the time he finished, I had everything pretty much locked up. Then I remembered the woman outside, and sure enough, she's still sitting out there. I look over at the clock, 8:05 p.m. I sigh. There's no way I'm going back outside to do this lady's gas as I told her when I close. It's already past closing, and my boss doesn't like paying overtime. I close up the store, turn off the signs, cash out the till, and as I'm putting the money in the safe, boat guy pulls away. Lady pulls up to the pumps and just sits there. As I'm leaving at around 8:15, hungry and tired because I had to close by myself in a lakefront town in the summer, this lady begins yelling at me. W. Are you going to pump my gas? Note. I hate people like this. Me. We closed 15 minutes ago. W. But I told you to wait and pump my gas. Me. Under my breath. Excuse me? Me. I asked if you could pull around so I could pump your gas and you said no. W. So are you going to pump my gas or not? Me. Screaming internally. I cannot pump your gas. The pump is off. The door is locked. The alarms are set and all the money's in the safe. I physically cannot pump your gas. W. I know, insert full name of boss that nobody other than strangers call him. He's my neighbor, so pump my gas. Note, she's not his neighbor. I know, like everybody in this town and where they live. I ignore her and keep walking to my car. The woman continues yelling. W. This is why you work in a gas station. You're too stupid to have a real job. Now pump my effing gas or I'll have your butt fired. I stop and turn around. Me. First of all, I asked you to pull your car around and you wouldn't. Second of all, I told you I literally cannot pump your gas. Third of all, even if I could pump your gas, I wouldn't. I don't get paid past 8 and have finals to go home and study for. Fourth, if you were his neighbor, you'd know how anal he gets about closing on time. And lastly, I've had it up to here with your attitude. The lady recoils a little. W. That's it. I'm calling, insert name of boss here, and getting you fired. Me. Go ahead. I already put in my 2 weeks notice. Boss's name wouldn't fire me anyway, as I'm one of the few employees he has left that aren't all new seasonal workers, and he'd 100% side with me anyway. At this point, I tune her out and go to my car, get in, turn it on, and pulling out of the parking lot as I'm leaving, I see her get out of her car and try the pumps. Me. But why, though? But I told you to wait and pump my gas. Unfortunately, ma'am, you aren't the person who signs my paychecks, and you don't get to tell me how to do my job. And our second story. Karen tells me smoking in my yard is illegal. So I thought I'd post my own Karen story. I live near a city park. By near, I mean across the street. When the weather's nice, I enjoy a nice fire in my fire pit, a cigar or two with a friend, and a glass of brandy. Nice, relaxing way to spend the evening. So a family in the area started having gatherings at the park every week, which is cool. They can get a bit loud, but by bedtime they've stopped, so I'm okay with it. However, one evening, the Karen of their family came to my house to complain. It seems the smell of my cigars was floating across the street and she found it disgusting. She explained that, according to city ordinances, it was illegal to smoke in public parks and that my smoke was violating the ordinance. I laughed in her face and said she was nuts. I was on private property and could do as I wished with smoking. She yelled for a while, made threats of police, but finally walked off, and I thought the matter was done. Until about a week later. A police car shows up at my home, and the officer explains he's been called with a complaint that I was being drunk and disorderly in public. Additionally, the claim was I'd been walking around the park smoking despite being warned that was against city law. The officer and I spoke for a bit, explained to him what I do and how I do it. He said he understood. I was fine, and he left. 15 minutes later, the Karen walked over to my yard to again complain about my smoking. This time she walked into my backyard uninvited. I just looked up at her and smiled. She started ranting, so I got a good big puff and blew it in her direction. Then explained she was trespassing and needed to leave. The same officer arrived 20 minutes later asking what had happened, and I told him. He went across the street, got Karen and a couple of her male companions and brought them over. He asked me to apologize for blowing smoke at her, which I did. He then asked her to apologize for filing frivolous police reports and entering my backyard uninvited. She, of course, became irate as to why she should apologize. She'd done nothing wrong. The officer waited patiently for a few minutes for her rant to wind down, looked at me, and asked if I wished to press charges for harassment and trespassing. She looked like she was about to crap her pants. The two guys with her started laughing and walked back over to the park. I told the officer if she promised to leave me alone, I'd let the matter go. She walked off in a huff, never actually promising to let the matter go, but I was okay with it. They stopped coming to the park, and so I just kind of let things slip. And then I saw her son, one of the guys that had been with her at the store. Seems she'd made the family move the weekly gathering to another park that was a bit of a drive for most of the family. She was still ranting about how I'd driven her out of the park a month later. The funny thing is, he and the officer now join me about once a month for cigars and brandy. And our next story. Shady customer gets frustrated with partially deaf employee. When I worked for this thrift store, we had all sorts of interesting characters. During this incident, I was ringing up a shady individual who looked like she could be stealing. I'm calling her Stella. Stella came to my register with a bunch of assorted stuff, clothing, etc. Her behavior in the store prior to her coming to the register drew a couple of red flags. Side note, I'm hard of hearing and my hearing aids need adjusting. This will be important later on. Stella comes to the register with her stuff and says to me that she has a $200 budget. On the inside, I'm doubting that, but at the same time, it's cool because a sale's a sale. She told me that she was wearing shoes from our store, so I told her that she needed to remove them so I can see the price. She was upset, but I told her that I would put them in a bag for her and give them back once she paid for them. Stella was not assured after I told her this. She kept insisting that I give her the shoes because they're rung up and claimed that I rang them up twice. I calmly tell her that she'll get her shoes once she's paid for them. After I've rung up her items, her total comes out to be under $200. I ask her for payment and she hands me her food stamp card. I was shocked, but at the same time, not really shocked because people have tried to use their food stamp cards to pay for clothes on a few occasions. I tell Stella that we cannot accept food stamp cards as payment, which is true because the POS system will not recognize it as payment. Stella's irritated and tells me that this card is like cash, but I tell her that it's used for food and not for thrift shop purchases. Now, Stella tells me she has to remove several items from her purchase because she only has limited cash on hand, no credit or debit. The real fun begins when she points to something and tells me to remove it, and I remove it, and she tells me, no, I want that item, so I put it back on and vice versa. It got to the point where I could hear what she was saying, so I told her politely a few times that I was hard of hearing and I needed her to repeat what she said. Stella, paraphrasing here, then tells me that half the store knows what she said and that since I was hard of hearing, I shouldn't be working in an environment like this. That hurt hard. I was speechless, so I just cashed her out and sent her on her way. My supervisor stood next to me and heard the whole thing and asked if I was okay, to which I replied in the affirmative. I wasn't. As I was fighting back tears, I assisted another customer who was way more nicer and not shady, while I overheard another customer telling my supervisor how well I handled myself with Stella. I swallowed my tears and toughened up a little bit afterward. And our last story. My neighbor thinks she owns a street parking spot. I've been having issues with my next-door neighbors since they moved in. The day they moved in, I got a knock on my door asking for our friends to move their car off the street. We figured they needed room for a truck or trailer, so we moved it with no issue. However, now every time we have company, if they park in that spot, which is half in front of my yard on the street, she comes out and asks us to move their car, and not very nicely. They have 2 cars and don't use their garage or driveway. This all culminated on Christmas Day when we had family over. The street was obviously full of cars due to the holiday traffic, so my in-laws parked in the only spot available. You guessed it, her spot. She came over on Christmas Day and cussed out my family about it when we refused to park around the corner. I contacted my HOA and they told me that the street is public property owned by the city and that unless I get the police involved, there's nothing I can do. The police aren't going to come out unless she gets violent, and I don't want it to come to that. We filed a complaint with American Homes for Rent, who they rent through, but I've heard they aren't very responsive. So we decided to keep parking cars in that spot on purpose. I consider it exposure therapy. She'll either get over herself or she won't. Hopefully, if she lashes out, she doesn't do so in a way that hurts anyone but herself. We also set up a camera in the side yard just in case. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.